Welcome to the Own It Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast, the place to come to get what you need to move yourself forward. Hey, it's Mary Baker and welcome to episode 319, When Divorce Isn't Just Divorce, How Control Masquerades as Conflict. Well, as you know, this month we're focusing on what it really means to get grounded again, especially after periods of fear, chaos, or prolonged stress. And because when you've been living in survival mode for a long time, it's not always obvious what's normal anymore. Your nervous system adapts, your expectations shift, and sometimes what's actually unhealthy starts to feel familiar. Many people I work with, and many of you, are trying to make sense of situations that don't resolve with time. Relationships, divorces, or conflicts that stay charged long after they should have cooled down. And you keep asking yourself, why can't this just get figured out and settle down? Why does it feel like I can never exhale? Well, today's conversation speaks directly to that. We're going to talk about the difference between normal conflict and control, and what it means when someone doesn't de-escalate, doesn't move on, and instead continues creating fear through manipulation, maybe financial pressure, or even the legal system. This episode is about clarity. It's about naming patterns that often get minimized or misunderstood, and about understanding why some situations require more than just patience, better communication, or just time. So with that in mind, I want to introduce today's guest, Lisa Johnson. So I'm really grateful to have had a wonderful conversation with Lisa Johnson recently, who is the co-founder of Been There, Got Out. Lisa is a high-conflict divorce strategist and a certified domestic violence advocate who has successfully represented herself through scores of court appearances. Her case was published in the Connecticut Law Journal and is now being used as legal precedent, something that's incredibly rare for a self-represented litigant. Her live testimony also helped pass Jennifer's Law in Connecticut, making it the third state in the country to expand its legal definition of domestic violence to include coercive control, a form of abuse that so many people experience but often struggle to name or be taken seriously around. Lisa and her partner Chris now coach people navigating high-conflict relationships, divorce, custody battles, and what many describe as co-parenting hell, helping them have the best possible outcome in family court and beyond. They also offer a weekly legal abuse support group for those dealing with narcissistic opponents in legal matters. Lisa is the co-author of Been There, Got Out, Toxic Relationships, High Conflict Divorce, and How to Stay Sane Under Insane Circumstances, which was released in March of 2023. And she has a new book out now titled When Your Ex Turns the Kids Against You, along with a comprehensive online course. This, I think, is a really important conversation, especially for anyone who feels worn down, confused, or up against a system that doesn't always recognize abuse when it's happening quietly and often very strategically. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Lisa Johnson. Well, Lisa, first, I just want to say thank you for coming here and being on the show. I really wanted to have you on because of the work that you do. And I have had the joy, I shall say, of sitting with so many folks over the years, going through high conflict divorces, coming out of narcissistic and abusive relationships, and then the real fun gets started. And they're always seeking resources out there, like who can help me, who can understand, how do I get through this? Really. So thank you for being here.
No, my pleasure. Thank you so much for hosting me.
So tell me how you got into working with folks going through high conflict divorces.
Well, of course, it wasn't something that I dreamed of as a child.
Right.
I was going to be a high conflict divorce strategist. I actually never even imagined that I would ever get a divorce. My background is in education. My master's is in education. I was a high school English teacher. I taught creative writing as well. I also taught English as a second language and English as a foreign language when I lived in Hungary like a few decades ago. So the education stuff was always in the background. And then when I had my first child, who's almost 26, I stopped teaching formally, and I had a bunch of other interesting careers while I was an at-home mom. But then in 2013, I basically discovered that my ex was living a double life, and it took about the entire marriage. And
Wow.
it took a couple of years to sort of wrap my head around it and do an exit plan. And because the last thing I wanted was to disrupt my intact family, or so I thought. So after I got out, I met with a divorce attorney who told me from 20 something minutes into our consult, yours is going to be one of the really bad ones. And it blew my mind because I truly believed that my ex was a good person who had done some bad things. And I had no idea how this lawyer could tell within a few minutes that mine was going to be bad. And he was right, because that first year it cost $100,000 that I'm paying back forever, and a full year. Mm. And so during that time, at the end, actually, when we didn't go to trial for that. We did have an agreement, but my lawyer said, your ex is not going to comply with this agreement. So you can't afford me. He's going to financially decimate you, and you're going to definitely be back in court. So you need to start developing a paper trail and do what you need to do to go pro se or self-represent. So I did that. And then it was a total of about 10 years in court, 7.5 years representing myself. And during that time, I kept thinking, I got to get back to teaching somehow. But every single time something would come up, like I'd have an interview, then there'd be a court thing. And so I'd have to drop everything and go back to court. And so people started coming to me, even though I had this crazy life. I still was doing well in court, but it took forever for orders and agreements to be enforced. It was getting a little bit exhausting giving free advice. And my partner and I thought about doing a book, which would have been my second book. And then we were told, you guys should do a course because people don't want to read about this. They need actual hand-holding and help. So this book idea we put on the back burner for a while, and then COVID hit. And Chris, I already had gotten a certification as a domestic violence advocate. My partner, Chris, who's also my life partner, got certified as a high conflict divorce coach. And we basically had been building a little bit of an Instagram profile. And we just put out our little shingle on Instagram and said, we're going to now do strategy sessions for legal abuse. I mean, actually, we didn't start. I think we did niche down to people dealing with a very difficult ex in the legal system. And so we put it out, and it's just been nonstop ever since.
Wow. That is such a long time for you to have to endure that. And I can imagine people are banging down your door because there aren't enough resources out there for folks. And so I'm really grateful that you're there. And also the fact that you have been through it and he's been through it, that you really get it and you really understand, because that is the biggest hurdle that a lot of my clients have faced, is finding people who really understand what's going on, because it is not a normal scenario.
Yeah. I think it's also important to note that a lot of people have gone through it, but not everyone has been successful. And I am really proud of my success. Like I said, I did do well, but it felt so freaking frustrating because it took so long for justice and karma to be served. But I always say they were served very, very nicely. But during this process, my ex appealed 4 times to the higher court, called the appellate court. And I was told by a retired judge who heard our case, not our case, like a kind of a summary of what we would maybe be going to court over, because the court systems are so overburdened that they do everything they can to keep you out. So when he filed these appeals, they had us meet with a retired appellate court judge who heard both of our sides and made a decision not based on what would happen, but he said, in my opinion, I don't think you should appeal this to my ex and his attorney because you're probably going to lose. And not only did they lose, but they lost big time because the case was so notable that it got published as case law. So I'm the only self-represented litigant I've ever heard of from talking to lawyers and everyone else that has been published as case law. So that was a really big deal. And then after that, he tried to sue my partner and I for $4 million in defamation in civil court in New York. And we got rid of that ourselves, but it's just been like on and on and on. I think it's done. Let me find some wood to knock. I think it's done. It's been a couple of years that I've had a break.
Wow.
But, even though it was exhausting, like I did really, really well. It didn't feel like it at the time, but it was like this slow process. And so when people are going through this and they meet others who didn't do as well, I think it can scare them. So it is important to connect with resources who, even though it's exhausting and frustrating, but did do well, because we can offer all of the stuff that we learned along the way. But I never lost my kids. Like I wasn't alienated from my kids. It was a struggle, but
that's really important, because those are two things that happen so often because they're right out of the playbook. How do people know that they're in a situation, in a marriage and or a relationship where someone shares custody of those kids, that this is going to be pretty awful? What are some red flags?
Okay, so first of all, know that people in these relationships, including me, 1 in 2 of us don't even know that we're in an abusive relationship, because most people equate abuse and domestic violence with physical abuse. And so they don't understand that invisible abuse is also really bad. And sometimes it's worse than physical abuse. So emotional abuse, financial abuse, which is present in 99% of cases like these, stalking, isolation, sexual abuse, legal abuse, like what I went through, revenge porn, where someone's threatening that if you leave them, they're going to publish sexual images of you that won't just affect you, but your family, your job. Like all of these things are types of abuse, and most people have no idea. They think it's just physical. And so it's important to note that many people do not understand. And that's why it's so important to educate people about what's called coercive control. So the kinds of behaviors that people do to keep you stuck in that relationship and make you feel like you don't have a choice and you can't live your life as an independent person. In terms of once you get out or you're at the beginning of the separation or divorce process, and I say both because half our clients have never been married. Things are different than they were years ago, but they still share children. At the beginning, it's very hard to know if yours is going to be high conflict, because most separations happen for a reason, and the general population divorcing is pretty angry. The difference is that usually 4 to 6 months in maximum, the anger starts to settle down. People think, all right, I'm tired of spending all this money and let's just start moving on with our lives and do what's best for the kids. The difference with high conflict cases is the opposite. The anger does not subside. So no matter how much time passes, they still want to keep punishing you. And we've heard it called a clinging kind of hate. They do not let go. And so it's like we say, you've got your own personal terrorist. They just keep going. And I always say, and I just said this to you earlier, divorce is just part 1. Part 2 is the terrorist campaign that goes on and on and on. And it's not that you're destined to have this person destroying your life. There's a lot of things that you can do, but it's learning how to deal with them, especially in terms of communicating strategically and getting them to find something else that's way more interesting than disrupting your life. Another thing that is an indicator of, let's say, high conflict divorce that anybody can be aware of, putting the anger aside, is that if you are involved with someone who has an active addiction and or a personality disorder, you are more likely to have a high conflict divorce. And I'm not talking about someone in recovery. That's totally different. But when you're dealing with someone who's an addict, they can't even think what's in their own best interest because their judgment is impaired. And so because they have such short-term thinking and they're so angry, they won't consider how their actions impact your finances and your family. And so that makes it really, really difficult. So that I would say is a big red flag. Another really common one is we talked about how financial abuse is present in 99% of these cases. When somebody feels entitled to the money and assets, the attitude is, I like to say, what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine too. Like, I'm the one who earned all the money. It doesn't matter if you raised the kids or contributed in all kinds of other ways, but that I deserve everything or I'll get to mete out what I think is fair. And that's not how it goes. But again, being in these relationships, sometimes we believe that. We believe that they get to make these decisions. And so it's really important to talk to neutral people, especially a divorce attorney, and find out what your legal rights are and what your parental rights are as well. But those are two indicators, someone who's just entitled and if they have mental illness or an active addiction.
Right. And if you're in active addiction, you are entitled and you probably have comorbid mental illness and a lot of times narcissism, you know? So that's usually a lot of times that is the personality disorder, or they're somewhere on that continuum of selfishness and denial and control, because addiction, I worked in treatment for a while. So addiction's all about control. That's the rest of the iceberg. So that makes sense. What about finding the right divorce attorney or an attorney for custody? What should people look for, do you think? What are the most important things?
Okay, so first, I think we need to talk about your own mindset when you come out of one of these relationships, and to recognize that for whatever reason, you've made your partner the authority. They've had all this control over you. And I think when people get out, they think, I need to hire someone who's going to be really aggressive and I'm going to pay them all this money and they're going to take care of everything for me. And that is basically repeating the same unhealthy relationship cycle. So I think it's very important to do what we call take strategic oversight of your case and realize that you have an opportunity that you really need to take in terms of shifting that dynamic and realizing that this is going to be a collaborative relationship. This person is not going to save your life. No one's going to save your life. And that you need to approach this whole process responsibly and understand that you need to understand what is going on every step of the way, because no one is going to have to live with the consequences of these decisions except you and your family. And so it's really important to understand that you're going to be an active part of this process, that cases like these often fatigue attorneys because they don't follow the normal cadence of divorce. Again, attorneys are trained in logic. They think, okay, everyone's going to come to the table and do what's fair and do what's best for the kids. That doesn't work when you're negotiating with someone who only cares about themselves. So things have to be approached differently. And even though I know how scary it is, and it's like, oh, I can't believe I finally got out and this person's so much smarter than me or knows how to control, you have all kinds of survival skills that you develop during this relationship that you are now able to use. So you know a lot more than your attorney about your ex. Your attorney knows the law. Their job is to translate your case into the law. But it's going to be on you to fill in all those details, not by swamping them with documentation, but giving them information they could use to make a powerful case. So understanding, let's say it's a custody thing, which is, most of our cases, understanding what factors matter in custody, what the alienation factors are. So you're doing things carefully where you're not wasting everyone's money and time, but you are kind of leading the process and being what we call the teacher's pet of clients for your attorney. So first thing, when you meet an attorney, you want someone that you feel comfortable with, because this is going to be an intimate relationship that you're not afraid of. Many people end up hiring attorneys that are very powerful and then they're scared of them. And sometimes the attorneys abuse them too, because it's matching that same dynamic in the relationship. Like attorneys can be very cruel to our clients, and our clients tolerate it because they think, well, this is the best. I already invested all this money. This is what I deserve, all that stuff. So understand that, again, this is an intimate relationship. You need to feel like you trust your attorney, because your attorney is going to be your voice. You might never have a chance to say a word in court. So you have to feel like they are going to represent what's really happening, but, use the filter of law to be like, that's appropriate, that's not appropriate, but you have to trust your attorney. So in that first meeting with the attorney, understand that it's a two-way street. So even though you're going to be asking questions, we want to have an attorney that's also curious and wants to know about you beyond just your financial documents. So make sure that that dynamic is present, that you feel heard and you feel understood. And they don't need to be an expert in narcissism, which everybody wishes for. And we call those kinds of lawyers unicorns. But at the end of the consult, or the first time, whatever it is, when you talk to an attorney, my favorite question to ask is, how would you handle a case like mine? Because this has multiple layers to it. First of all, it shows that the attorney has actually listened to you. And second, it gives them a chance to tell you what their strategy would be for this kind of case versus normal divorce, which is handled, again, very, very differently.
That's really important. Yes. And so that they do understand what they're dealing with. I mean, would you say that it would be helpful to find someone who does understand manipulation, who does understand what the playbook really looks like so they know how to strategize?
It's so tricky because right now, divorcing a narcissist is probably the top line used in marketing by many attorneys who know they can capitalize it, because narcissism is such a buzzword. So you want to see if they actually do, when you describe what you are dealing with, if they say, you know what, I think I understand what's going on here. I have experience. That's great. But it's hard to tell. So what you can do is, there's a lawyer website called avvo.com. So you can look up lawyers on that site, and there's going to be reviews, and don't expect all positive ones, because people leave reviews only if they're thrilled or furious. And there's always going to be someone who feels one of each. So what you want to do is look for reviews that talk about complex cases, possibly like very difficult exes, very difficult custody situations, how the attorney handled it, if they felt like clients felt like it was handled with sensitivity, if they were strategic, but look for things that kind of resonate with you in the comments to see that maybe there's someone out there that gets it. But do not be fooled by the marketing, and don't just say, oh, do you understand how to deal with narcissism or borderline? Because they're going to all say yes.
That's really good advice.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, can you describe some of the things they're going to be looking at when they do start to divorce someone like that, or to legally look at custody with someone like that? What are some of the big things that stand out for you that they want to be aware of? I know there's so much, and we don't have all day to talk about it.
I know. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a couple of custody factors that many people don't understand really well, or don't know about it, and they make a lot of mistakes. Each state and country has their own list, but there's some general things that we see over and over and over, because we work with clients all over the world. So one of the most important custody factors is which parent is likely to support the child's relationship with the other parent. And the flip side is one parent attempting to undermine that child's relationship with the other parent? So many people go into these situations thinking like, the kid wants to be with me, they don't want to be with the other parent. I'm going to tell every professional involved how bad my ex is and how we need to keep my child safe, and they don't have any evidence of abuse. And then they end up getting less custody or losing custody, and they can't believe it. And then they complain about the court system and bias and stuff. They don't understand that really important factor of which parent is likely to support the child's relationship with the other parent. Because if you go in gangbusters like that, you are going against the values of the court, and you're also going against human values, because your child is half of each of you. So unless you have some really solid evidence, documented abuse by third parties, pediatricians, child protective services, et cetera, like patterns of behavior, because keep in mind that even someone in jail still has rights to communicate with their children most of the time. So you don't want to go in attacking your ex. I mean, there's ways to express concerns, but just understand that your child's again, is half of each of you. And the relationship they have, if one parent attempts to undermine that relationship, that's going to harm your child because that's going to interfere with their ability to form healthy attachments to everyone in the future. And this is like a huge topic, obviously, about estrangement and alienation. But you don't want to go in thinking just because my ex was abusive to me, I need to keep my kids away, because the courts separate domestic violence and custody. Certain states, certain countries it does have an impact, but I think in people's minds, it's directly connected, and it's not. So that's a big mistake. That's so important to know. And then the other one that we really want to focus on is something called consistency, stability, and routine. So when a separation occurs and there's children, the children's lives are the ones who are disrupted the most. And so everyone knows that we all do better when there's a routine. And so often judges and court professionals will say, okay, you guys are going to live separately, whatever, but we want to keep the kids' routine as stable as possible. And so if you can present yourself as the parent who's like, I'm not trying to relocate across the country because I'm divorcing my ex, but I want to do everything I can to keep my kids' routine as consistent as I can, that will make you look much better than being like, I got to get away and we got to change schools. And it's too much. So generally, the courts will say, let's take things slowly, but the kids need time to adjust.
That's really good to know, because it also made me think how typically on the other side, the other person, the person you're divorcing, is not going to be dumb enough to do things that are that obvious anyway. If they're going to be unstable, it's going to be very passively. They'll take them to school, but maybe they don't make them dinner. But there's food in the fridge.
Right.
I mean, really subtle, insidious things are typically what are going to happen in terms of benign neglect, I guess is what you would call it.
Mm-hmm.
And very subtle things in terms of how they treat the kids verbally. And I just think that it is really important what you're saying is to not assume that the court will see all that, because they can't see that.
No, and they don't have time. They don't have time. I mean, when we think about how to present properly in court, when we're working with a client, especially if they're representing themselves, and a lot of our clients have lawyers too, but it's the idea of, Your Honor, this is what I'm asking for, and here's why I'm entitled to it. And making sure that you or your lawyer, your lawyer should know how to do that, knows this has to be built on your own timeline and case law. So you have to tie it together to make the judges, if you get to the judges team, get to court, you want to make it really easy for the judge to connect the dots. So sometimes people will be like, I deserve all legal decision making. I get to decide medical, education, extracurriculars, and religion because I'm the one who did it, in the past. But that's not a given at all. So you really need to present a case as to why your ex is incapable of participating in decision making. Has there been neglect? Has there been abuse? Have they interfered with a child's IEP, individualized education plan, and you've been the one who's gone to all the meetings, they've never showed up. You're the one paying for the private school and your ex won't contribute. Those are things that are more specific that might give you a leg up. But in general, and all of this has to do with leverage. We do a lot with negotiating outside of court as much as possible, because when you go to court, judges are like, I don't know who you are. I'm just going to give you joint everything, because if you don't have anything else to show me, that's what we gravitate towards, is shared parenting. So you really have to consider that. It's not that people are generally everyone has biases, but right now in this day and age, people want to both have the opportunity to parent. If one person doesn't, then you gotta show that. You can't just expect a judge or anyone else to just
exactly.
know it.
And it's not 50 years ago where just because you were the mom, you're going to get custody and he's going to get visitation, or the other partner is going to get visitation. You're right. And it's great. The joint custody has become, at least in this country, pretty much the norm. But that's where it can make it really difficult if you're dealing with someone, especially a covert narcissist, who's really nice on the outside. But you're right, not showing up to IEPs, finding reasons, quote unquote, to not get them to the doctors. All of those kinds of things are really hard to prove in terms of child abuse and neglect. And they know that. They know where the thresholds are. So
Yeah.
one of the things I wanted to talk about is, how do you get strategic going into it? We talked about great questions to ask to find a great lawyer that will work with you, but also, how do you protect yourself? How do you get strategic even as you just begin this process?
So I think it all starts with something we call strategic communication. We actually have a course out. It's called How to Communicate with Your Ex Without Destroying Your Case or Losing Your Mind. It is the basis of everything, because another major custody factor is the level of cooperation or lack thereof between you and your ex. So you always want to present as the best co-parent ever, but at the same time, you're documenting your ex's patterns of behavior, the visible impact it has on your children and on your relationship with your children. And so even though you're going to be communicating, we say in writing only, because we want as much documentation written as possible, or you can't really use it. You're writing to your ex, but you're writing for that invisible audience. So you always need to be very aware and not do what's called pop off because you're angry, because that turns into exhibits. So understanding how to build that paper trail of you being really reasonable, you supporting that relationship no matter what's happened, again, unless there's some, extenuating circumstances, which most of the time people think their stuff rises to that level, and it often doesn't. But to show that you're trying to work together with this person, and also that you're trying to work together outside of court, that you're shielding kids from the conflict between you, that you're acknowledging that it's best for your family to make its own decisions rather than leaving it up to strangers to make decisions, that your money is better spent on your children than on paying professionals just to fight about it. Because again, at the end of the day, it's just you. It's like at the end of a funeral, like everyone's gone and you're still there dealing with it. So I think all of that is really important, but strategic communication is everything. It turns the power dynamic around. It also protects you from what we call false claims of parental alienation, because often when your ex is trying to turn the kids against you,
Exactly,
they'll say that you're the one doing it because they project their own bad behavior. So this is a great way to protect yourself. And it also turns hearsay into evidence, because one of the best exhibits is your communication with your ex, where you can show, like, this is how I've tried to work with this person. And that'll contrast you from a judge just saying both of you are difficult. So you want to make sure you do it right.
That's really important. And also, as I was listening to you talk, a lot of times covert narcissists know that as well. And they'll try to come across as parent of the year, even though they haven't been.
Right.
And to look calm, to present as very calm and bait you at the same time. So then your hair's on fire and you look like the person who is unstable and has anger issues.
Right.
So I love
Right.
what you're saying in terms of be very strategic in how you speak and how you want to present yourself, because you're not just communicating with them, but you're communicating for the court eventually.
Right. Right. Or like attorneys for
Right.
the child, a mediator, a child's therapist, a custody evaluator. So everything is going to be, imagine everything is going to be looked at.
So what about some of the things that are going to happen during a legal separation or afterwards, after you leave the relationship? There are all types of abuse that you've already talked about. There is the emotional, there can be threats of physical, there can be legal abuse, financial abuse. And so I'd like you to talk a little bit about what should people prepare for financially. I mean, I know what I've seen clients walk through, and I've seen hopefully all of it by now, and it can be pretty scary. And to drag things out and to not provide income and all the things that they can do. There's just a million of them.
Yeah. So one of the things to prepare for is that your ex will not cooperate with what's called the financial discovery process. So during a divorce, and especially even if you're not married, but there's going to be child support involved, everyone has to kind of financially undress and show all of their income and expenses, and so that people can put it into a calculator and figure out what's fair. even if it's not equal or equitable, but just something. So a lot of times, most of the time, our exes and our clients' exes don't cooperate with the financial discovery process. And so it ends up costing us lots of money because we have to go chasing after it. We have to go back to court and make motions to compel and motions to produce and discovery and interrogatories, where it's just on and on and on, chasing after the money. And so just expect that. So if there's any way to get a hold of records before you exit the home, do it. Even if you can't get all the records in full, but you can get account numbers. If there's cryptocurrency, if you can get, I think it's called like a wallet, just something to show that it exists. That's going to save you so much money moving forward, because you won't have to chase it as hard. I mean, the cost of forensic accountants is crazy, and most of our clients unfortunately have to have them because it's like picking through all this stuff all the time. So just be ready for that. Be ready for them not to comply with orders or even agreements with child support where they just won't pay it. And then the burden is on you to go after them or to go to Department of Child Support Services to enforce those orders. It's just like endless, like chasing after somebody. One way to prevent this is to have really strong language in a parenting plan. We always say the parenting plan is like your constitution. So you want to have enforcement language, deadlines, and consequences. So not if they don't comply, but when they don't comply, this is what's going to happen. Because when you go back to court, and again, notice I said when, not if, when you go back, you want to make things very, very clear to a judge that this is what's going to happen. So it's not like they're making their own decision. The judge can just look at your agreement or parenting plan and say, oh, it says right here that if this person doesn't pay and 30 days have passed, then we're going to have support services deduct it from their wages. And there's going to be state interest applied. So like 6% if it's Connecticut, or 10% or 9% if it's California. So again, making things very, very clear is so important. The financial abuse leads me to what actually legal abuse is, because that's what I dealt with for so long. And that is when there's really two different kinds. So one is what we call vexatious litigation, when your ex is constantly filing motions to basically terrorize you, and you're ending up spending tons of money, getting an attorney to go back to court and deal with this. And the flip side is what I had, which is someone who did not comply with our orders and agreements. So the burden was on me to keep going to court to try to enforce that. And like I said, that was, 10 years total. That's what you can expect. It is a marathon. And I think having a lawyer for the initial divorce or custody issue is so important because they establish the foundation. But once you have a really good parenting plan or stipulation in place, when your ex doesn't comply, there's training that's involved to represent yourself, but it's much more limited than starting everything from the beginning. And so, like my lawyer said to me, I would have to go pro se. Otherwise, he would financially decimate. We try to work with clients to figure out ways that they can represent themselves or use what's called limited scope attorneys who can help in the background. And we always want you to have some kind of legal thing in the background. And there's some really cheap ways to do that, just to make sure you follow proper procedure, et cetera. But to, again, deal with things more yourself, because legal fees are so expensive.
That's really good to know, because I think one of the things that can keep people from addressing issues that their ex-partner is creating is they're like, Mary, I don't have money to go back to court. I don't want to go through all that again. If they have to go back to court, that they can receive training and some legal support without thinking that they have to go through that whole process again, because so many people that I've talked to say, Mary, I don't have the money. I can't take time off work. I just can't do all of that again. So if they know that there is, assuming they have a solid parenting agreement, that they have something to stand on, and then they can go back in and fight. So I think that's really empowering.
Yeah. And there's resources. I mean, most courts have what's called a pro se help desk, and they'll work with people who don't have attorneys to make sure they file the proper forms or give them ideas. I mean, they can't give legal advice. They can't give you personal legal advice. They can give general advice. But I mean, we all know how expensive it is to pay for attorneys. And I think months ago, and it's probably gone up since then. 3 out of 4 litigants in court were pro se. Now with AI, it's probably even more people. Not that you should count only on AI. It can be sort of helpful with stuff, but you really need to talk to people to human beings.
Right. Absolutely. Wow. That's an interesting statistic. The other aspect I wanted to talk about is, and unfortunately, I think this happens so often, I would say 3/4 of the time, when you're dealing with someone who is selfish, is self-absorbed, and wants to do the power grab, is them grooming the kids in a way where they're having the children choose who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, and creating the alienation. Well, of course, they are accusing you of that. And so I understand that you have a new book coming out. So I'm really excited to talk to you about that. Can you let us know what that is?
Yeah, so I'm really excited as well. It's called When Your Ex Turns the Kids Against You. It'll be out on March 18th, 2026. And it's really about how to deal with alienation in and out of the court system and out of the legal system, because so much of it occurs behind closed doors. It's very hard to prove in court. And so what do you do when it's happening? And I feel like this issue happens with most of our clients. It's baked right into legal abuse. It feels like once they don't have that day-to-day way to get at you, they're limited to 3 things: money, kids, and the court. And I always say money and the court go hand in hand, but kids last the longest. So they will go after the kids and put them in what's called loyalty conflicts, where the kids feel like they're not allowed to love both of you. And so it's really, really important to recognize what's happening and then start nipping it in the bud when it happens. So that When Your Ex Turns the Kids Against You, it's a book, but it's also this huge course that I'm doing. And I'm so thrilled to get back to teaching again and doing some more group stuff, because we do a lot of one-on-one strategy sessions with our clients too. Yeah, but very, very excited. It's so huge. I mean, it affects 22 million divorced parents in America and Canada alone. It's an epidemic. People don't want to talk about it because there's so much shame. I always think about the term ambiguous grief, where if you had a child who died, you'd have a whole community rallying around you to support you emotionally. But when you have a child that's not talking to you, people will judge you. And, you know, it's like, what did you do wrong? You must have done something horrible. They don't understand the nature of domestic violence. And there's reasons why. I mean, there's valid reasons for why kids don't talk to parents, but often in cases like these where there's been a very difficult separation or divorce or custody battle, it's because something like that is present. And so people often feel helpless. They feel like, well, you know, there's nothing I can do about it. I haven't seen my kid in a while, or my kid doesn't want to go with me, and maybe I should just do what my kid wants. And they end up really ruining their own relationship with the kids, and also affecting, again, the kids' ability to have relationships with others moving forwards, because kids are kids and they say all kinds of things, especially when they're under the influence of a difficult parent. But interviews with alienated children as adults, like most of them felt like, what happened to my parent? Like, why didn't you try harder? You know, why did you abandon me? Why did you just walk away? Even though in your mind, you're like, well, I thought that's what you wanted. But remember, you're dealing with a child most of the time, or a teenager with all those hormones going. They don't know. And their brains change. I mean, you know this, their brains change as they get older. So it is really, really important to understand that kids experiencing this, they can be so difficult to deal with, because often it's like, oh my gosh, my kid is sounding just like the person I got away from. I don't know if I even want my kid around me if they're going to talk to me like that. But your children who are in these situations are also victims of domestic violence. They are being manipulated. They see both parents as authority. Sometimes they see one parent as an authority because they see how you were treated, and they're fawning because they're doing what they need to do to stay safe. So there's so many things involved. And I think it's really important for people to understand what this is, why your ex might do it, what it feels like for a child, and what you can do, again, legally and especially outside of the legal system to preserve and protect your relationship with your children.
Absolutely. Yes. It's heartbreaking and can be devastating for people. And it is right in the playbook, and 95% of the time will be used to manipulate the child. And then, like, oftentimes you'll see if there's two children, one will go rescue the abusive parent as well, because subconsciously they're just stepping into that role in the family. And then they feel bad, and then they feel responsible for that parent's feelings because, of course, if you have an entitled parent, they're not going to take responsibility for their feelings. That's the whole problem. And they are subtly gaslit and manipulated and put in the middle, and it's terrible for them. It's terrible for everyone. And the three categories are so true: money, court, and the kids. And they will do it in such subtle ways that they don't have to take ownership of it either.
Absolutely.
That's why I think education is really important. That, yes, the downside is everyone's a narcissist these days. But I think that whenever you bring a cause out into the light and start educating the milieu about something that has been going on for a very long time that no one is talking about, that you're going to get those instances where it becomes a fad. But I think what's really important is that the education here really matters, because this is not like other situations. This is not like divorcing someone or, trying to find a way to share custody with someone who's maybe just a little bit immature, a little avoidant, a little, self-centered. To me, this is more like a game. And you have to know what the game is. What are the rules of play? What does it mean to win the game? But what is the other person really trying to do? Work through your own denial and go kicking and screaming to acceptance that, oh, that's what we're dealing with. That's a whole process. I'm sure you sit with people around all the time. And then, how do I do this in a smart way?
Yeah. Yeah. Because there's such long-term effects of all of these choices.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm so grateful you're here to do this work. As exhausting as it was for you to get to this process, to help others, I'm not glad you went through it, but I am glad that you are doing this work and normalizing that the work needs to be done.
Yeah. I mean, I love doing this. I feel like everything led to this and I didn't know it at the time, but it's the best.
So how can people find you, Lisa? Where should they go?
Super, super easy. So our website is BeenThereGotOut.com. Our first book is called BeenThereGotOut.com. The next book is also Been There, Got Out, as the main, the subtitle is, when your ex turns the kids against you. On Instagram, we are at Been There, Got Out with little underscores. We're on all other social media platforms as well. We have a podcast called Been There, Got Out. We've got a YouTube channel called Been There, Got Out. So my email is lisa@BeenThereGotOut.com. It's just me and my partner, Chris. His is Chris@BeenThereGotOut.com. It's just the two of us. We always answer. So super easy.
That's great. So they can reach out if they need to work with you. They can listen to your podcast, find you in social, and grab some education. And I think some affirmation that they're not crazy, that this is what they're going through, and here's how they can get some help.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Lisa. And I'm really excited about your book coming out and your course. And I'd love to have you on in the future and talk about this some more, because there's always so much to talk about.
Yeah, I would love to.
Thanks. Thank you, Lisa. It was so wonderful to have you here on the show. And I'm just so grateful that you're out there doing what you do, because we need you. So as we wrap up today, I want to name something really important. If this conversation stirred up some things for you, like confusion, grief, anger, or maybe a sense of clarity, well, that makes sense. High conflict dynamics and coercive control don't just drain you emotionally, they distort your reality over time. And so many people don't even realize what's happening until they're already questioning themselves. And I think Lisa's work exists because this is real. And because too many people are trying to navigate systems that weren't built to recognize the quiet, very strategic abuse. So if you're in the middle of something like this or supporting someone who is, I strongly encourage you to explore the resources Lisa and her partner Chris offer through Been There, Got Out. And I also want to say this. You don't have to choose just one form of support. In fact, you shouldn't. These situations affect your nervous system, your self-trust, and your sense of agency, not just your legal reality. So I want to remind you that alongside Lisa's legal and strategic guidance, my Find Your Voice course is designed to help you stay grounded, empowered, and connected to yourself as you move through these high conflict situations. Because at the end of the day, it's about rebuilding self-trust, strengthening your boundaries, and learning how to show up clearly and calmly, like Lisa talks about, especially when things around you feel very chaotic, very intimidating. And I don't think you can have too much support, especially when you're navigating something this complex and long-standing. And getting the right support in multiple areas can make all of the difference. That's what I see working so well for my clients. So take care of yourself as you process what you heard today. You don't need to have all the answers right now. You just need awareness, support, and steadiness. Those are powerful first steps. So today I was joined by Lisa Johnson, co-founder of Been There, Got Out, for an important conversation about coercive control in high conflict relationships. She explored the critical difference between typical divorce conflict, which usually de-escalates over time, and controlling behavior that escalates, creating ongoing fear, instability, and exhaustion. And Lisa explained how coercive control can include manipulation, financial abuse, and legal abuse. And just as I've seen for many of my clients, it's often carried out in very quiet, passive ways that are easily misunderstood or minimized. And so we talked about how these people never cool down and how the legal system can be used as a tool of control. And why Lisa believes that patience and better communication are not enough in these situations. And that it's really important to be strategic and tactical and have great support. So make sure you check out Lisa's information in the show notes. Check out my group if you need some additional support. Believe in yourself. If you have someone close to you going through this, believe them, even if you don't want to think it's true. Okay, so pay it forward, keep focusing on you, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you can begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now, so you can really own it later.